going on, guys? Welcome back to From Wayne to Wonder, our Batman review. Guys, welcome to the final movie before the Batman. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Project Potter. Go check out the other content, of course, guys, if this is your first time here. If you do like the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you haven't seen the show before, what we do is kind of a quick thoughts or recap, my favorite parts about the movie. We do The Hero We Deserve, which is my favorite character. We do Someone Who Watched the World Burn, which is my least favorite character. I scored a 10 in the rankings, of course. So, guys, like I said, final movie before the Batman. Very excited. But, guys, I'm going to say I was wrong. I was wrong with this movie. I thought this was going to rival The Dark Knight. I thought it was neck and neck. Now, guys, let me just say that this movie is a decade old, almost a decade. I think it came out in July. So at the time of this recording, February 2022, a 2012 movie, guys. So I can't even believe it's been that long. I remember seeing this movie in the theaters. I think I worked at the theater actually when this movie came out. And so it's been a while, and I thought this movie was epic. And let me just give some advice to you guys. Do not confuse a few really cool moments and a couple of really cool characters with a good movie, because this is not a good movie. We're not going to go to the score just yet. That comes later. Bane, I think, is really cool. I was watching on HBO Max, like the 4K version. I don't know if they changed his voice, but I remember at one point you couldn't understand like anything Bane was saying. Everything was very clear for me tonight, and so it really, really added to the performance. But I think they changed it or they cleaned it up, because I know there was a complaint where people were like, "What is he saying? I don't know what Bane is saying." Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, I think, is perfect. Like, you couldn't have cast that any better. I think she's incredible. She's sexy. She's cunning. She's great. Alfred, of course, great. Michael Caine, he said, "I failed you." And I'm like, "You didn't fail me, Michael Caine. You were great. You were the best Alfred I could ask for." I think it's great because last 2 weeks, guys, I watched Batman Begins and Dark Knight back to back. Wrapped this trilogy up nicely. And it's just like, this movie doesn't hold a candle to those two. And it's just not a good film. As tight as the Dark Knight story was, where it's like every scene was impactful and every story beat was hitting. And it's like one scene led to another, and, you know, it was intense and you were on the edge of your seat. The story is such a nightmare and it's such a mess. And there's so many like convenient plot points or just like stupid designs. I mean, guys, we get Jim Gordon that gets hurt. He goes down in the sewer, and then he is like, I don't know if he shoots himself or he gets shot in the leg, and then he rolls into like the fucking sewer drain, and he just, first of all, he would have drowned easily because presumably he can't swim or anything, because he's like on like just about dying, and he just goes out to the end of the sewer. And guess what? Detective Blake, who ends up being Robin at the end of this movie, and they were really pushing JGL, guys. And the guys, I love JGL. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, one of my favorite actors, fantastic guy, just a really special person. They were pushing him hard in this one, and it seems like they were setting up for like a Robin spinoff or something, but we never got that. So I don't know what was going on, but he's introduced in this movie, and they're like focusing on him a lot. The stock market scene is not good. They just like take over the stock market, and it's weird because they like put a truck there and put up these little barriers, but then they like ride out on the bikes. We do get a cool scene where the guy says, "Oh, you're in for a treat tonight." And Batman comes in on the bike. It's not as cool as it was in Dark Knight, though. Obviously, that was revealed in Dark Knight about the bike and coming from the Tumblr. One thing I do really like about this movie, guys, is that we find out it's been 8 years. And we remember, guys, at the end of Dark Knight, Batman took the fall for Harvey Dent. And they said, you know, Batman killed Harvey Dent and he killed these 5 people or whatever. And then he had to run. He took the blame, and basically he ran away. And then like Bruce just like snuck into his mansion. Although it's really weird because Batman goes away and then Bruce goes away, and it's like, dude, if you want Batman, first of all, Bruce has it perfectly, because all he has to do is like run away as Batman, get rid of his costume or whatever, and then he can just be Bruce Wayne. There's only like 2 people that know he's Batman, you know. And so what's weird is that Batman goes away for 8 years, and then they're like, "Oh, well, no one's seen Bruce Wayne," and I'm like, dude, you just gave away your identity, basically. Like, if Batman goes away and Bruce Wayne happens to go away at the same time, don't you think that that's something you should put together? Really dumb, guys. Bane's plan is to like, but he gets people underground. They're like building some sort of fortress underground. All the cops go underground, and then he just like laces it with bombs, and they're all trapped under there for like 3 months apparently. And I don't even know how they got food and water, but they survived. And that's like the whole big story, I guess. And there's a couple of really cool scenes, like at the football field, where Bane, is like, the people of Gotham. He's like, this bomb is mobile, and you should take back your city. I don't know. Bane's entertaining, but and I love Tom Hardy, and I really like the whole story and the twist at the end where Talia al Ghul is like betrays Bruce, even though it's so obvious that they're like, I forget what her name is in the movie, like her alias, not Talia, but she's like so interested in Bruce, and they're like, oh, she's a lovely girl. She's like, how about this, Mr. Wayne? You go away one time. Alfred's like, oh, I have a dream, that you go one time and we see you across the cafe. And it's nice because I really like Alfred in this movie, and he, cares so much about Bruce, and he really is like, I don't want you to die. He's like, I don't want to bury another family member. And we get the amazing scene at the end where he says, I failed you. And he's crying, and it's like, oh my God, dude, pulling my heartstrings more. Michael Caine. Yeah, it's just a mess. They get like the nuclear reactor or whatever it's called, the detonator, and then there's like, oh, the bat, and there's like no autopilot, and it's like, oh, someone of a better mind would fix it. And I remember because Bruce sacrifices himself at the end, where he sacrifices himself. He takes the bomb out on the bat, goes out to the bay. Everyone's like, oh, it's great. There's this weird back and forth where they're like, don't go across the bombs, or they're going to detonate it. It was too similar to Dark Knight, where Joker had the detonator and the fairies, where that was done great. And then Bane is like, someone in Gotham has the detonator. Who is this mysterious person? Don't know, but they're going to blow something up. And it's like, no, it was just Talia. And it's like, it doesn't even make sense. It would have been much better if it was just like a random person or a cool cameo or something, or I don't know, or someone that Bruce loved and they were like, their hand was tied to it or something. And if Bruce came closer, it was like, would have triggered it. Something cool like that. Instead, it was just Talia. And it's like, okay, she was down the whole thing of Bruce crawling out is cool. The fight with Bane initially is cool. But Batman's also beat to shit. He goes to the doctor, and they say he's got like no cartilage, and like he's got nothing left, right? And he's just absolutely like can barely walk. He's got a cane. He's walking around. He hasn't shaved in the beginning. And it's like, I don't know. I like that he kind of builds himself back up, but he fights Bane knowing that he's like disheveled and can't do it anymore. And it's been 8 years since he's been Batman, and he was already like 30 or whatever, I think, when he became Batman. And so he's probably like close to 40 now. And it's like he's going out there. It's just crazy because Bane is like, obviously Tom Hardy is Jack for this movie, and he kicks Batman's ass, and he's like, you fight like a younger man. His vertebrae is like sticking out because Bane from the comics like breaks his back apparently over his leg. And then I do like the fact that Bane says like, I'm not going to torture your body, I'm going to torture your soul. And then he puts him in like the jail, and he's like, I'm going to watch the city burn or whatever. And it's cool, but again, guys, just not a good movie, just really not a good film, and just super messy. And I found myself like bored. This is a 2 hour and 45 minute movie. 2 hours and 45 minutes, guys. This does not need to be that long, okay? And I think the new Batman is probably close to that, which is great. But that's supposed to be like a slow, like mystery suspense thriller, almost like a serial killer detective type movie. This is like action based, but it's like, Bruce he isn't Batman for half the movie. And it's like, we already did Batman Begins, where he had his origin story and he wasn't Batman until later. And I don't know. It's like we got Batman, then we got peak Batman, Dark Knight. It's just weird, guys. And I don't want to spend any more time on the plot, but meh. Okay, guys, the hero we deserved, which is my favorite character. I have to give it to Alfred, guys. Michael Caine. I mean, he's so good. Their whole relationship has been great from Batman Begins on. Alfred's like bringing him breakfast over and over, and then he has like that moment where he's on the bed again, and he does like the piano key, and he goes back down, and he's like, it's been a long time since you've been down here, Master Bruce. And he goes in there, and he's like tracking Selina Kyle, and it's like, oh, this is the Bruce we know. And Bruce doesn't just like sitting around. So Alfred knows that, but Alfred also loves him and cares for him. And, he tells him that great story where he's like, I hope to see you one time. And then we get to see at the end because Bruce says that the autopilot was fixed, which apparently only Lucius knows because he finds out and he didn't even know. But he sees Bruce at the end with Selina Kyle. And it's really nice because they actually had really good chemistry, I think, between Anne Hathaway and Christian Bale. And it's like Bruce finally gets his happy ending. And I don't know if I thought it was like a debate when this movie first ended. Like, did Bruce get out? Did Bruce, what happened? No, he just fixed the autopilot, and then he fucking set the thing autopilot, and then he ran away, dude. Like, it's super obvious. But it's like the symbol of Batman died, like, because everyone thought he was in there. And maybe that's why he told Jim Gordon that there was no autopilot. So they thought he would just sacrifice himself. But the camera is very misleading with like shows what Batman is in like a cockpit. Anyway, guys, I'm getting way too off track for our hero we deserve. But yeah, Alfred's there from Bruce's side. I just loved for all three movies, guys, like I said, their chemistry and how Michael Caine just always cared for Bruce and always gave him great advice, and it was always there and just helping him with gadgets and whatnot. And it's really, really great. But it shows the strain that he has, where like there's a scene where he says like, I heard your cries in that hallway or something, and it's like, wow, dude. Alfred has known him his whole life, and it's like he doesn't want to bury another family member, and he doesn't want to lose a family member. And it's crazy, and I just love his performance, and I think he's the best Alfred by far, and he just was, I think, the best character in this movie. Okay, guys, and who watched the world burn, which is my least favorite character? I think it's Commissioner Gordon here. First of all, super weird choice, dude. Jim Gordon was first of all, he was great in Batman Begins, and he was so good in Dark Knight, and he was such an integral part of Batman, like working with him, and it's like, oh, Jim Gordon and Batman are like messing stuff up now. Then they just like sideline him the whole movie because he gets like a gunshot wound. Gary Oldman is such a legendary actor, and his performance, especially as Jim Gordon, is so good. It's like, why would you put him on the sidelines for most of the movie, man? I think he did the best with what he could, but this is more of like his character's situation. Like, why was Jim Gordon put aside? It's almost like they wanted Officer Blake or Joseph Gordon-Levitt. They clearly wanted him to have more screen time. So they kind of wanted to replace him, but I think he would have been an excellent partner. I think we could have had Jim, and you see him like leading the guys a little bit, but if it was Jim as the chief and then JGL as his right-hand man, that could have been almost like a Batman and Robin cop thing. That would have been great. And I really like JGL in this movie, but his character sucks. And Commissioner Gordon, I think, suffered because of that, and the story suffered because of that. So for those reasons, I would say the Jim Gordon, unfortunately, watch the world burn, Mr. White. Okay, guys, that brings us to our score. Guys, this is a 6.8. This is, like I said, not a good movie, guys. The plot just all over the place where Bane comes over and takes over. I like how Bane exposes Jim Gordon, and that's another thing I didn't say for my least favorite character for Jim, is that Jim's lie is exposed. First of all, I guess Bane takes his papers when he captures Jim, and then like his whole everything that happened, the truth is on this, like these pieces of papers where, Jim brings it at the beginning of the movie and he says like, I have the truth, what happened to Harvey, but he's like, now's not the time. But then it's like, oh man, it was a little too convenient for me where Bane is like, your mayor here, he is not telling you the truth about Harvey Dent, and this is the reclamation, Gotham. It's a cool idea, but then he's like, oh, let's release the inmates, and then everyone always wants Gotham to destroy itself. And I'm like, why do people care about Gotham so much, dude? It seems like a shithole. And it's like, it's so weird. But, Jim has that great line at the end where he says, like, I see a resilient people or whatever it is. And they're trying to build back up. But it's just like between the weird bomb, Bruce is sidelined too. So we had Jim Gordon and Bruce sidelined for most of the movie. And Bruce does have the redemption where he's like, I'm not afraid to die. I'm just afraid to die in here. And the guy tells him, like, you're not going to get out of that hole unless you climb up that rope and you get that fear of death back in you. There's no greater motivation. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But it's just weird that he like goes out there knowing his body is shit, fights Bane, gets his ass kicked to almost an unrecoverable extent, if that's a word, and then builds himself back up. And it's just weird because he's like in the city, and then he's like, you're gonna watch the city fall or whatever. And Bane like hangs a couple guys, and it's like similar to Dark Knight, except not as cool as Dark Knight. And he's like, no, I'm angry. And then he keeps failing. And there's a quick line where he's like, why do we fall, Bruce? But they didn't really like come full circle back to that. The whole like, oh, trap Gotham on their own island and stuff like that. And it's just like, we've already done this. And especially within this trilogy. And Dark Knight just did everything this movie did way better. And the story was better and the villain was better. And it's like, I really love Tom Hardy as Bane. And I love Anne Hathaway. I almost said Anne Hathaway. It's just not a good movie, guys. And it's not going to do well in the rankings. I'll tell you that much. And then we do get to the rankings here, guys. Guys, the only one this is going above is the 1966 Batman. I really was wrong about this movie, and maybe it has been a decade now where I've cleared my head. I've watched with a critical eye. I've watched Begins and Dark Knight back to back. I've watched all the other movies leading up to this every week. And so now that I've seen all the Batmans and I can kind of put them together and compare them to each other, this one is not a top tier movie. It's a bottom tier. And it's like, man, all the other movies like Batman and Robin, Batman Returns, 1989 Batman, those all had great moments, even though I wasn't fully in love with some of those parts of those movies. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, so much more fun than like pretty much anything in this movie. And I really like the serious tone of the Nolan movies, but I just thought that Bane was a great villain in a not so great story. Where the opening plane scene, guys, I didn't even talk about. I mean, goddamn, like what a scene that is. Where Littlefinger's there, and he's like, oh, pretty loyal for a hired hitman or whatever, and he's just like, or perhaps he's wondering why you'd shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane. And it's like, oh, it's great, dude. But then he takes off the mask, and it's a really cool reveal. But then Littlefinger's just like, if I take that off, will you die? And he's like, it would be extremely painful. And he's like, you're a big guy. And I'm like, oh, why did this extra line go in there, dude? We had it. It was cool. We find out later on that Bane actually helped Talia up there because he loved her. Then he got the shit kicked out of him, which is why his face was all fucked up, which is why he needs that thing to breathe. But that's another problem, guys. When Batman first fights Bane, all he has to do is like disable his mask, and he doesn't do that because then the second time he fights him, he like hits his mask over, and then Bane is going crazy because he can't fight. And yeah, I like this Bane a lot more than like the luchador wrestler jacked up on toxin Bane that we get in the comics and the Arkham games and the previous Batman. But it doesn't save this movie from being just kind of a train wreck. Okay, guys, well, that's it. That's another episode of From Wayne to Wonder, guys. That is the last one before The Batman next week. I'm going to go see that in theaters. I'm very excited, guys. That will be dropping again next Friday. So keep an eye out for that, guys. That's going to wrap up our Wayne to Wonder. Thank you guys so much for joining me for all of these. I've had a really good time watching these. This one just kind of let me down. I remembered this movie being a lot better than it was, but that's the good thing about kind of going back and rewatching these movies, guys, with a critical eye and having some time gone by. You can see which ones hold up and which ones don't. And so I've had such a great time doing this. But we'll see you guys next week to finish it out with The Batman. Very excited about that. I'm so excited to see Matt Reeves' take on it and see how it kind of compares to Dark Knight movies. And I think there's already rumors that Matt Reeves wants to make a trilogy with Pattinson. So we'll see. But either way, guys, we get a new Batman next week, which means a new Bruce Wayne as well. Super excited. Appreciate you stopping by on the channel. Like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, guys, time to go mobile.